Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainability Forum, organised by YUSU and part of the university's One Planet Week, where we have a panel of speakers to comment and answer questions on the university's new Sustainability Plan 2021 to 2030. We've currently got 36 participants tonight, so that's a pretty good turnout. My name is Jamie Sims. I'm the chair for the evening. I'm an external trustee for YUSU and the Director of York Community Energy. Our panellists tonight are Charlie Jeffrey, the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of York, Joan Concannon, the Director of External Relations, Richard Walker, Interim Assistant Director of Campus Services, Ben Villamy, Chief Executive Officer of YUSU, and Johan Fazy, Director of Strategy for the Department of Environment and Geography and Professor in Social Dimensions of Environment and Change. Matthias Ruth, the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Chair of the Sustainability Working Group, can no longer be with us this evening. Just before we move on, I'm just going to invite Ben Villamy to comment on why we have no student officers on the panel representing student voice. Ben, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jamie. Just to really briefly say, I can't decide whether it's a fantastic thing or an awful thing that this One Planet Week coincides with YUSU's annual elections. So actually later this week, students will start campaigning for a number of roles with the Students' Union, and they'll be voting next week. You heard it here first, folks. If you can vote, please vote next week. And as a result, actually, some of our most passionate students are unable to contribute to this agenda because they're busy preparing their own campaigns, their own agendas. And actually, I can tell you that I do expect a number of sustainability issues to be featuring in agendas from various candidates for the elections coming up. So, it absolutely wasn't a lack of will from students or a lack of desire or commitment to this agenda. It's just a quirk of timing.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So I'm just going to briefly tell you all about the running order for events tonight. So in a minute, I'm going to invite Richard Walker to give a brief introduction to the sustainability plan. And then I'm going to ask the rest of the panel to introduce themselves briefly in a little bit more detail, with particular attention to their role in the development of the plan and sustainability work on campus more broadly. Then we'll have approximately a 10-minute discussion about the plan, how it's developed, who was consulted and why it's necessary. And then for the remaining period of time, about an hour, we'll go to Q&A. So that will be a combination of pre-submitted questions and also questions submitted tonight, all of which will be moderated. Just to let everyone know, we've had 23 pre-submitted questions, and no doubt there'll be some submitted tonight as well. So my apologies to you in advance if I don't get to every single question, because there simply won't be time, but I'll try and combine some wherever possible and cover as much as we can. I'd also like to say thank you to Felicity Palmer, Pierre Roger and Craig Lomas for managing the event, doing the moderating, sorting out the Zoom link, the tech, and so on. So many thanks to you guys. We couldn't have done this without you. So over to Richard Walker now, please, to talk about the introduction to the plan.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the sustainability plan. And I think before I go on to the plan, it's probably best to start talking about the university strategy. So that covers 4 key pillars, with the main principle of the university being a university for public good. But the key parts of the strategy are inclusion, collaboration, internationalism, and environmental sustainability. And just some of the text that's included within the plan. It states that a university for public good must, by definition, embrace and promote the principle of sustainability. Now, we started consultations on the sustainability plan, and I was having a look back. It was April 2019, so it was ahead of the formation of the university strategy. But that initial consultation started to look at how we might set a framework for the sustainability plan. So we looked at various approaches that we might take, and we settled on the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for how we might pull the plan together. So the initial part of the consultation was to have a look at what goals within the Sustainable Development Goals we could use and make a real difference around sustainability. So we had a few sessions in what was the Sustainability Working Group at the time, where we looked at what types of goals we might be able to make the biggest impact on. So within the plan, we've got 6 key areas, and they're based on the goals themselves. So we've got quality education, climate action, sustainable cities and communities, responsible production and consumption, good health and well-being. And then because we're a research intensive organisation, we've got an overarching goal of sustainable research. So I'll just talk you briefly through some of the principles of the actions that are associated with those goals. So if we take quality education first, we're really looking at how we might improve our teaching activities to deliver those in a sustainable manner, how we might empower our students and equip them with knowledge to take out into the wider world once they've finished their studies and indeed while they're here. In terms of sustainable research, we're looking at how we can research in a sustainable way, but also increasing our impact around sustainable research, sustainability research, which we've got a really good record on. In terms of climate action, and this is the one that gets the most focus, we've set our ambitions to be a net zero university. So that's for scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030 and a 30% reduction in scope 3 emissions. But we've also set out how we'll lay out our adaptable foundations in terms of the estate and the changes that we'll need going forward. We've also got some targets around sustainable cities and communities. So they're looking at how we might partnership better, how we connect with our stakeholders and other key people that we're linking with around the university to promote sustainability and use our reach. And then there's lots of actions around our supply chain and what we produce and consume. And that's one of our biggest areas of emissions when we look at our scope 3 emissions. So that's something that we're really keen to focus on. And then finally, we've got good health and well-being, which is also key to delivering a happy university. So we're looking at how we make sure that our students and staff and other stakeholders are happy and healthy and can contribute in a meaningful way. So that's a quick rundown of the sustainability plan, and we'll be picking out aspects of that, I'm sure, as we go along in the questions. And I think that covers my few minutes on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard, for that. Just as a reminder to delegates, if you want to ask questions tonight, you can submit a question in the Q&A option and the menu at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So I'm now going to ask each of the panel members to say a very brief introduction about themselves with particular reference to their role in developing the plan. So Charlie, could we start with you, please?
Thank you very much, Jamie. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the university, which is an interesting and curious role. It's partly chief academic, partly the chief executive, and partly the chief advocate for the university. I've been here for 2.5 years in that role, and right at the start of my term, I did an open lecture. And I can't remember the exact words I said, but it was something like environmental sustainability being the defining issue of our age, and that universities had 2 things to do about that. The first is that they are uniquely placed to address that issue. We discover and disseminate knowledge at universities through research and teaching, and with and through our students, and that knowledge is vital. And then secondly, we have a responsibility. Universities typically have a commitment to contribute to the betterment of their societies. Richard talked about our language of public good. So we should use that knowledge that we can generate and disseminate for general benefit around environmental sustainability. I think there are 4 key ways of doing that, which are all covered in the plan. The first is that we should be a role model in how our organisation and operations promote environmental sustainability, and I suspect that will be a big focus this evening, and rightly so, because we have made quite a lot of change, but there's an awful lot more to do. And that's going to be challenging, and we need to be honest and direct about that challenge. Secondly, we should focus our research on environmental sustainability and make sure that we do so across intellectual boundaries, not be bound up by traditional academic disciplines, because I don't think one discipline can address the issues that we need to. And then thirdly, environmental sustainability needs to be an important part of our teaching and learning, ideally for all students, whatever their degree program. We can't underestimate the power that the ideas and the understanding that students will take with them from university into whatever they do afterwards can have around the challenge of environmental sustainability. And very recently, we've established a new cross-departmental academic unit called the Environmental Sustainability Academy at York, which is designed precisely to capture those research and teaching elements of our plan. Finally, we should work in partnership with other organisations. Where we can join forces, we should, because we can extend our impact in that way. And that's about partnerships in city and region. It's about partnerships in the economy. We have a flagship project at the university called Bio Yorkshire, which is effectively a regional economic development programme devised with partners in and around York, with local authorities across our region and with businesses across our region, as a way of harnessing our research and the capacity of our graduates to drive on real change around biofeedstocks to replace hydrocarbons in producing the materials we need and the fuels we need to live our daily lives, in thinking about a circular economy which wastes less, and thinking about a move to net zero farming. And that's, in a sense, a way of capturing all that we do in a project which externalizes our expertise and our role modeling. And perhaps we might have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that later on. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Ben, can I come to you now, please?
Thanks a lot. So, as Chief Exec of the Union, I guess there's 3 key things that we oversee in terms of students and the environmental sustainability agenda. So, first off, we are lucky to have a growing amount of student activities. So these are student groups, there might be volunteering groups or common interest groups where students have really been inspired by the environment around them. They want to challenge it. They want to make it, better and more efficient and effective. So they set up things like Beekeeping Society or Scoop or Vegan and Vegetarian Society or People and Planet or Fill Bellies Not Bins, and the list could go on. And the union tries to support them with grants and with space and nurturing and promotion to really galvanise students around those areas of interest. Secondly, we have this interest around the INE agenda as a venue provider and a facilities organiser on campus. So we run a number of venues, cafes, coffee shops, bars, etc., and some fairly large-scale events. And we can see that we have a responsibility to reduce the negative impact on the environment of those activities and services, and to try and lead by example, to try and set the bar quite high. We've worked with the university on the York Cup scheme. In the first 6 months, we generated £22,000 worth of funding from that scheme, whilst reducing the use of single-use cups, so that we could invest it into recycled plastic tables that last for 25 years longer than their counterparts, as an example. We eradicated disposable cups and straws, and we've looked at moving our purchasing and our supply chain to much more local providers. Our major festivals, our last major Freshers Festival, we aimed to run on a zero waste basis, and we took 214 kilograms of waste that would have otherwise gone to landfill and managed to use it alongside farming locally as a natural fertilizer. So these are examples of how we're trying to lead by example in our trading. The third, and perhaps for me the most important area where we're involved, is in supporting students on green campaigning. So we're really trying to help them to articulate their sense of urgency at the scale of the climate crisis. We're trying to help them to make representations to other students, representations to the university and to the city and to the country around them. And they declared a climate emergency in 2019, and we've been trying to work with them on what that means and what's the detail that comes from that. Some of our students have been involved in work around the first buses in the city and how they can green their fleet. I am really proud that we can see this growing sense of commitment to the green agenda from our students. And so finally, what I'd say is that my personal responsibility here is to try and build bridges between the ambitions of our students and actually the city, the university, and other institutions around them. I fear that there is sometimes a lack of understanding about how to work together on this. And the agenda is far too complex for any one institution to solve on its own. It will require people being able to come together. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ben. We just need to speed up a little bit now to keep track on time. So can I come to Joan now, please?
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm Joan Conkennon, I'm Director of External Relations, and that covers a gamut of reputation building activities from the whole mix of communications and public engagement right through to all things recruitment in every place that we want to attract students from, our philanthropy endeavours and our alumni engagement, and a whole raft of other things as well. But in the interest of speed, I think I really wanted to pick up on themes around community, people and place, and the opportunities I see through this sustainability plan to really drive change from a number of dimensions, particularly around awareness raising of the scale and complexity of the challenges that we face, the opportunity to drive our partnership engagement through the lens of sustainability. But I'm particularly interested in the intersection of sustainability, environmental and climate crisis with other forms of inequality and climate justice. The opportunity through our education, through our research to engage partners. As Ben said, I think partnership is the key to this. No one organisation is going to create a silver bullet to solve anything by itself. So the models that we created, and I'll particularly talk around the partners that we've worked over the last few years in the context of the York Festival of Ideas, which is a flagship public engagement activity. It's one of the largest free festivals of its kind in the UK. We work with more than 100 partners to deliver 200 or so free events every year. And we particularly have honed in, and we've worked with One Planet York, we've worked with Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Friends Provident, the French Embassy, rafts of economists and climate change leaders and sustainability experts to really draw attention and engage from young children right through to policymakers and influencers. The scale of the challenge, the intersectionality of that challenge, and the way that we need to work together to rethink how we engage with people. And a particular element of that I'm especially interested in developing even more work is around co-curation and co-design of those events. And so the opportunity of working further with our student communities and our city partnerships to really think collectively at a city level how we can create a kind of collective learning environment that looks at what the tangible practical outcomes are, that each individual person can feel empowered to deliver that change, but that we are also collectively thinking about our positioning around the idea of public good, the roles and responsibilities of higher education to drive social purpose, and a collective commitment to do things differently in a whole raft of dimensions where others on this call are much more expert to talk about. So I'm really interested in how we can work together to create a shared voice, to drive collective change, and to think differently about the challenges, but also to think tangibly and practically around the immediate things that we can do as individuals and as a community.
Thank you, Joan. Johan, can we come to you now, please?
Yeah, thanks. Welcome everybody. It's really nice to be here, and great to be on this panel. So my role is Director of Strategy in the Department of Environment Geography. I arrived about the same time as Charlie did 2.5 years ago, my key role in that is to help us raise our ambition in our department in terms of both the teaching and the research, and how we see ourselves in a world of things like climate change. So the ambition raising and our sort of goals to be much more influential has led to changes in our strategies around how we teach and research more towards solutions rather than just analysing problems, and bringing our values to the fore. So key to all of that is being authentic. So we've just appointed a new Director of Sustainability as part of our leadership team, because we recognise this is so integral to all the things you're talking about, Joan, and that are facing universities, and it's a major challenge to think about how we move in that direction. And I think just in terms of my own research and work, it's very much about how we bring the long term into the short term action around how we get transformative change. So rather than just incremental change, how we make the step changes that we need in order to be able to align ourselves better to the big challenges that are facing universities and people on this planet.
Thanks very much, Joe. And if we can end up where we started with Richard, please.
Hi, I'm the Interim Assistant Director of Campus Services. So I don't run all the functions around sustainability on the estate, and there's some really good work that goes on within the university from our technical teams that optimise all our building controls to make sure everything works efficiently. Our travel and transport teams who operate the scooter trials and the free bus services and all the transport initiatives that we pulled together, all the waste management activities that we have on campus, and the fantastic engagement work that we do as well, including One Planet Week and the Green Impact teams, and all of those sorts of things are all managed through the directorate that I work in. And I don't think we can go without mention of the fantastic campus grounds either, that have got a Green Flag Award. They're accredited to ISO 14001 environmental standard. We're also a hedgehog friendly gold standard now, I believe, as well. And we're a registered park and garden, and some people will travel a long way to go and see one of those, but you've got one right here, which shows we're a good custodian of our estate as well. But just in terms of the sustainability plan and my involvement in it, I was really sort of a facilitator in its development. So we ran workshops, we interviewed stakeholders, we proposed the goals and targets that you now see within the plan, and we worked with people across the university to really develop what I think is a plan that touches on all aspects of our operations and will help to move us forward.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. So just before we go to questions, then we're just going to spend kind of 5 or 10 minutes looking at how the plan was created. So I guess my question here to chuck in is, I'm aware that the university in the past has had a carbon plan. Why has it been felt necessary to now have a sustainability plan? How was it developed? Who was consulted? And how did we get to this particular point? So who would like to kick off the debate on that one, please?
I'm happy to go on that one, Jamie. So we did have a carbon management plan. We also had a sustainability plan as well, and they weren't always as joined up as they could be. And we've always had lots of excellent activity at the university. What we've struggled with in terms of sustainability sometimes is something to tie it all together. So when we were putting the proposals together for the sustainability plan, we wanted a rounded plan, but we also wanted to create a plan that had good governance around it and good reporting, so we could make sure that going forward we were doing the right thing, and we could show people that we were doing the right thing as well. So the sustainability plan isn't something new. But in 2020, the old carbon management plan was coming to an end, and we needed to develop some new targets going forward. And that was really what kicked off the discussions in 2019 about how we start something new, and then how we take that forward. And we're just going through a piece of work at the moment that at the end of that particular piece of work will come a new carbon management plan, but that's associated with our race to zero now. So we're looking at activities about how we might decarbonise the estate and how we reduce our emissions. So in terms of the plan formation, it was just some natural progression from old plans finishing and having to have something new and forward looking. And obviously with it being a key part of the university strategy, it had to be something that was ambitious as well.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Does anyone else want to come in there on that point? Yes, Charlie.
May I, Jamie? Just to say a word and to put it in the context of the university strategy. Richard's talked about the mechanics there. I think there's a question at the level of principle as well. I mentioned my inaugural lecture in my opening words, and the main focus of that was to think about how and why the university was set up in the way it was in the 1960s and what we could learn from that. And I think this university had really, really strong principles in its foundation, which were captured for me in one phrase: the amelioration of human life and conditions. That was what we were set up to do through our research and teaching. And we were looking for ways of articulating that founding commitment in a way appropriate to our time. Richard gave the four key principles which embody that for us now. That is collaboration across our conventional academic boundaries, because we think we need to bring knowledge from different contexts to bear on the problems we face. Inclusion, making sure that we really do all we can to let the talents of all members of the university community unfold. Internationalism, that is the idea that we can and we should learn from the experiences of others. And almost underpinning the lot of those things, environmental sustainability as a core principle of the university, as a core expression of that commitment to ameliorate human life and conditions, and as an expression of priority. So in addition to the mechanics, which are really, really important about how you build together a plan, I think it's important to recognise that foundation in principle as well, and the way that echoes the things that led to this university being founded in the first place.
Thanks, Charlie. I think it's really important for participants to hear the value base to the plan. But I mean, looking at some of the questions as well, and I'm thinking, I think if I may direct this to you first, Charlie, and then maybe come to Ben on this one. What do you think the balance is between university accountability and, if you like, management accountability and academic accountability to do something on this, and also stakeholder accountability in terms of engagement and participation and the way in which the plan was developed?
I would say that, clearly there's a role for management, and clearly there's a role for people to define near-term and longer-term responsibilities. But the challenges we face are so fundamental, so comprehensive, that the only way we're ever going to master them is by mobilising the whole of our community, both within and beyond the university. So I can only see this as a whole university challenge affecting our operations, affecting the core academic work that we do, and affecting the way in which we engage beyond the university.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Ben, if I can come to you, please. How do you think the students would expect student voice to be reflected in the plan, and also in the way the targets are monitored as time goes on?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I think there's a real challenge that not specifically at York, but that there is a parts of society have lost trust in institutions to make the changes required. Whether that's some of the stuff we see with governments or with local authorities or with students' unions or with universities. And we need to win back some of that trust. We need to let students and young people and others know that we understand the sense of urgency, know that we are willing to engage with that sense of urgency. And I guess there is a link there, as you suggest, with the kind of transparency of dialogue around this. So, students and people who want to have some trust and some faith in us to make the changes that are necessary, they want real transparency around objectives, about metrics. They want to hear us say out loud that there is a crisis. And that's quite difficult for institutions. Institutions aren't great at acknowledging some of the risk that exists in the world around them. But we kind of need to turn around and say that there is irreparable damage to some parts of our environment, and before it entirely becomes irreparable, we're willing to take action. Obama said, we're the first generation to feel the effects of climate change and the last generation with a chance to do something about it. And I think that's a really interesting kind of call to arms, and that's the sort of call to arms that students want to hear us make. And if we can couple that with really good quality, transparent data and intelligence and metrics. I had a quick look around at what other universities are doing in that space, and I was disappointed. The best examples were not in the UK; they were from abroad. Some really interesting examples in the States, Pittsburgh, Alberta, Washington, have really interactive, good quality data, and you can split it by food systems, transport usage, building usage, water usage, loads of stuff there. In the UK, it was less impressive, actually, but Sussex and Manchester Met were reporting outputs and outcomes regularly and with kind of an ease of access and good reference points. And so I think there are templates out there that we can follow, but if we put data in a kind of open source way in the hands of all of the constituencies, and if we acknowledge that there is a crisis that requires some real strength of endeavour to turn around, I think we will take students with us. We will take wider society with us.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I just want to develop that theme a little bit and come back to Charlie then, and then perhaps Joan. But there's a question here which says, can you explain what you mean by university for public good? And then there's another question later on about accountability, which I think could be translated as, well, how does a university for public good decide what's good for the public, and how is it accountable in doing that? And also, how do we measure it?
All fantastic questions, and I had that conversation with my senior colleagues, academic colleagues across the university, and I'm not going to presume that I have an answer to it, because I think that question of what our collective purpose and impact is not mine alone to specify. But what I think is those principles which I've outlined should be a way for us to guide what we do, with an understanding that might be a way of achieving public good. We're also thinking very hard about how to produce some metrics which might give us a handle on how well we are pursuing that aim. Some would like us to use the SDGs in their perhaps even in their entirety. Others are looking at how some of that can be focused into questions of social value alongside the more direct metrics around economic impact that universities and others have long used. We are planning to have such metrics as one of the guiding points of our operations shortly. They're not yet there yet. But I think that it's really, really important to reflect on new ways of trying to capture the impacts of what we do, because I'm not sure the old ways have really given a clear understanding of the kind of impacts that we have, and have perhaps reduced the sense of the impact that we might have. I'll stop there, Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Do you want to pick up this whole pace about civic good and so on, Joan?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about demonstrating the huge social value that education brings to society. I think we live in an era where the value of universities is almost on a daily basis being questioned. So the idea of demonstrating the relevance, the impact, and the transformational power of education, it feels to me absolutely integral to how we talk about ourselves and who we engage with in a very collaborative way. So it's not the notion of just banging on about the University of York just for its own sake. It's about that idea of demonstrating to people who have very little to do with us, who don't understand or don't engage or think we are not for them, that actually education and what goes on in universities has the ability to transform everybody's lives for the good. And you can define good in lots of different ways. And part of that is actually asking the question about asking different organizations, different communities, different people to think about the ways that they would like to engage with us, to think about things that they would like us to do to make society better, to make our communities better and more effective. And I think that really, we can't wait for somebody else to do that. And I think you only have to look at how ignored young people were in the context of a national response to COVID, where 18 to 25-year-olds were frankly the cohort that nobody seemed to think needed support in a whole variety of ways. And that intersects so much with a lot of public discourse that is highly critical of young people in a way I find bewildering and deeply aggravating, because every student I engage with is really inspirational. And the passionate commitment they have to topics like environmental sustainability and climate are really the kind of people who are going to get us out of this mess. And I think everything we can do to talk about university communities as active and proactive agents of change feels to me something that is our absolute responsibility. And so all of our public engagement and community engagement is shaped around working with people to empower them to tell their stories and not for us to do it for them.
Thanks very much, Jen. If I may just stay with you for a minute, then there's also a related question, which is how will we help students, institutions, and the wider city to work together on sustainability? And Johan may also have a view on that, but if I can start with you on that one, Joan, please.
So we work really closely, and I would say, and I think Charlie's lived experience of this over the last 2 years as well, is there's nothing like a major crisis to draw people together. We have really short lines of communication and really strong collaboration now with a whole variety of institutions across the city that give us a unique opportunity to do things differently for the future. And that includes collaborative action, and Matthias isn't here, but the work that he's about to embark on around the Climate Change Commission that's set up by the City of York Council, I think is going to be really integral, and perhaps Johan can say a bit more about that kind of work. But I think it is this ability to actually think about the specificity and the value of York as a community coming together to do things differently is really exciting to me. And I think there's a real sense of both urgency and agency in terms of that willingness to come together to think differently. And that, spans, Charlie mentioned Bio Yorkshire earlier, the construct of devolution. It's about to kick off. There are real opportunities around devolving power and funding to our local region that mean we can put in place innovative projects that really tackle issues around net zero and so on. So I think there is a real sense of collective willpower and a coalition of the willing who are really engaged in this endeavour. And I think students play an integral role of that. And I would say to every student who's on this call, there will be lots of consultation and lots of engagement opportunities as the city starts to develop a plan. And you are residents here, and we want you to stay here. So you've got real opportunities to engage and help shape a future plan around sustainability.
So, Johan, what's your take on that, and also what factors can help push boundaries on future strategy development?
Yeah, thanks. So, if I come into it at quite a high level, when I look at our approach to renewing our commitment to being a university for public good, I don't think we should underestimate the significance of that. If you think about many of the universities in the US in the 1960s, for example, were developed specifically to be separate from the environments that they were in, the world of practice. because that was the hallmark of being a good scientist, standing from the outside looking in. And to make a statement, which is essentially a statement about identity, about renewing our commitment to be a university for the public good, opens up a whole set of possibilities that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And it trickles down from that identity and a shift in identity or renewing our identity down to being able to address some of the conceptual systemic barriers that we have to doing things and interacting, like essentially having disciplines that have grown up in silos and then wanting to work across each other. That allows a new space for interacting around different ways of teaching, different ways of thinking, different ways of engaging. And that helps us to then think about how we might act differently around addressing the more tangible sustainability issues. How do we reduce our carbon emissions and things like that? And so we shouldn't underestimate the importance of those principles and that scale, because it sends out a really powerful message for a different way of engaging. And that then sets the scene for engaging differently with the partners around us, whether it be the city or otherwise. Now, just one very quick example of that that's being built through the ESA, the Environmental Sustainability Academy of York that Charlie mentioned earlier. And that is one of the things we're going to establish is a sustainability clinic. So it's modeled on the law school clinics, and law schools around the world, they have, in York, there's a whole module that undergraduate students have to do as a sort of pro bono engagement in law. We're going to apply the same thing around sustainability, and that will open up a different way of engaging, so allowing students to engage across campus with those in the locality and beyond around that sort of thing. So I think that's just one tiny example of opening up the space for a different form of engagement. Having said that, though, I am of the belief that we need to massively up the scale in terms of the degree of participation that we enable. We're just at the beginning stages, and I think Charlie, your renewal of that commitment to being public good was really heartening to me when I came, because it just gave me something that I could work with to raise our ambitions and change the dynamics of what we thought ourselves were, and therefore who we engage with. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Thanks very much, Joan. Can I come to Ben now? So I think developing that theme, Ben, I'd be interested to hear more about what you think students are saying about trust in our institutions. So if we're going to widen and deepen the form of engagement that Joan's just mentioned, what more do we need to do so that students and young people feel they have some agency, as opposed to just to develop things at the scale and the speed that we need, as opposed to our more traditional institutions, including universities, if I may say so, setting the pace on that?
Yeah, I think there's a massive opportunity there, and because apologies to anyone I'm about to offend, but I think students would rather not be sat in rooms with people like me in them or the rest of the panel. They'd rather be sat in rooms with local school kids and their next door neighbour, and the elderly person who lives on the street, and the GP and the bus driver, and so on and so on. So, if we can facilitate that sort of conversation happening, that's where they will become really, really excited. So, earlier on, Charlie talked about this kind of growing sense that perhaps it's time to reorientate education systems around the climate emergency, and that might include, apologies because I might be misrepresenting Charlie here slightly, but this idea about kind of creating almost elective modules on every single course that a student might do. Well, wouldn't it be great if we were then equipping our students to go and teach similar electives in local schools and in community centres? So we're passing it on, and that's where that belief system, that again to quote Joan, urgency and agency. The students would love to pass that on. They'd like to be part of a chain, a kind of mobilisation that goes beyond the walls of the campus, beyond university decision-making fora, and out into the big wide world. And I think that's where it could get really, really exciting. But we would need to equip them with the tools, the space, the time, the encouragement, the support to do that really effectively. It's a leap of faith, I think, for all of us. But if we can take that leap of faith, that's where it will become transformational.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I think. Sorry, does someone else want to come in there?
I was just going to come in and say that started already with the carbon literacy training programme, where students are being trained as trainers to really drive local change. And the other thing that I met one of our amazing academics today, Maria Bryant, who's leading a whole raft of programs at primary and secondary school level that is around, I talked about intersectionality earlier, around food and sustainability and climate science. And she's been blown away about how aware and engaged even 7-year-olds are. And so that opportunity to really scale up that kind of activity, we really need to go where our audiences are and not wait for them to fall over us, because they won't. And so I think that stakeholder engagement of being humble enough to go where audiences are, where real community action is taking place, and to really think about how we learn from them, as opposed to arriving like Moses down from the mount with a tablet of stone, because I don't think it works like that anymore, if it ever did.
Thank you, Joan. There's a couple of questions which I'm going to try and amalgamate just to kind of finish off this area, and then move on to kind of some questions on climate action after that. So the questions are really around the link between environmental and social sustainability and social responsibility. And so there's a question here. Yeah, how's the university planning on implementing its social responsibility into future activity? And also, why does the university refuse to divest from investments in conflict and companies that violate international law? And there's kind of, speaking on intersectionality, there's a kind of hint on decolonization here as well.
And that was quite a few different things bunged together there, Jamie. So I'll try and link across them. I think we have to be attentive to concerns like all of those, and to think very, very hard about how we not simply respond to them, but embed different ways of working in what we do. I think that the questions there about social justice, about decolonisation, are absolutely present across the whole of the university. Clearly, really, really important in our student body, but absolutely central to what many of our academics are thinking about how they should do their research. And how they should take the ideas that they generate in their research into their teaching. And I'd probably like to link it back to the previous conversation. I think sometimes we can be very risk averse in how we set out our academic work and the boxes in which we put in it. We should be much more confident in opening out to our students and opening out beyond the university, and in a sense connecting those two things. I was in a conversation earlier on this afternoon with a brilliant charity with which we work, which is focused on opening up routes of access to university for students from underrepresented backgrounds. And one of the things that they do, which enormously impresses me, is to take subject matters which students are not going to come across in GCSE and A-level curriculums, but might come across at university, and get them to think about them, including, for example, how we would tackle some of the challenges that you just set out. Now, I think that's brilliant. I think that we should be much more confident in opening out the questions that we set ourselves in our work to our students, and then taking that out, perhaps through adaptations to our curriculum, into engagement with the communities around us. Again, I'll stop there. I'm probably going on for too long. But we really do need to respond to those kinds of challenges that we get, and be ready to question ourselves and the way that we have organised what we have done in order to think about those prompts our students give us.
Thanks for picking up that googly ball there, Charlie. Johan, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just Briefly, I mean, I think we've really struggled this at a departmental level. How do we do that? And one of the things we started doing 2 years ago was making really explicit what our core values are, the values of who we think we are. It's things like embracing diversity, it's striving for environmental sustainability. These are the things we thought we were already, but we felt we really needed to nurture that and empower that. And so we use that now in our recruitment, so we ask questions about when have you demonstrated an example of one of these values. So we're actively recruiting people. We have our awards are based around those values, and we're trying to build that sort of community. And then the second thing that we've done, which I alluded to earlier, which was really trying to think hard about what do we need to have in every conversation. Now, I'm sure most of our audience will know that environment is very rarely in the conversation because it doesn't have a direct voice. So there are many things out there, intrinsic sort of valued things and also alive things that don't have a human voice. And so that was one of the reasons why we've appointed a director of sustainability, because we needed that challenge to everything that we were doing. And then secondly, around our equality and diversity, we're trying to work out how we do that. So we're actively trying to build it into our voices, and then we're working on gender diversity and things like that. In the scale of the challenges that are out there in the world, it's relatively small change, but we're trying to really build that and build ourselves as a community where we're actively involving our whole selves in that process, allowing a space where it's not just the professional thinking and thought to come in, but it's actually the whole person. It's what we actually feel that's really important. And we're finding that so enlivening for staff and our students as we're starting to roll it out around a community of how we involve our students. So one of the things is just quite simply opening up our feelings to this and actually allowing ourselves to go, this stuff really matters, and that's why I do the job that I do, or that's why I do this or why I do that. And you start to see a whole different set of things blossoming, and therefore the possibilities emerge for something really different. If it's all about the sort of careers or professionalism or something like that, or competencies or whatever, then you forget the vast amount of a person, which is their, what they feel is really important. And most of our students are coming and our staff are coming because they want to do good in the world. And again, that's why I think, that our renewal of a commitment to being a university for public good is just so important, because it allows the space for that to happen.
Thanks, Johan. I want to come to a question on climate action and carbon reduction now. So I suspect to begin with, it's probably best aimed at Richard, but there's a couple of similar questions here. The first one is, do you think that aiming for total carbon neutrality by 2050 is fast enough to call ourselves a truly sustainable university? So I think that's probably a reference in the plan to the Scope 3 emissions target of 2050. And there's an associated bit which refers to a lot of estimates saying that the world will use up its carbon budget for the Paris target at 1.5 degrees probably by the end of this decade, not 2050. So is 2050 too late? I think is really what the question's asking. And then alongside that, what are the university's current annual emissions figures, and what proportion of those are Scope 3 figures? So I don't know, maybe start with Richard and then back to Johan. What do you think? Or does anyone else want to? Yeah.
Well, I'll start with the emissions data because it's probably easy to do it that way around, and then we can have a wider conversation. So in terms of our emissions on Scope 1 and 2, we have 27,000 tonnes, which represents 23% of our total. So Scope 3, we have 91,000 tonnes, which makes up the remainder. So in total, we've got 118,000 tonnes of carbon. In terms of the targets, they've been set in terms of regional and national targets. So City of York Council, they declared their climate emergency, and they set a 2030 net zero target. So theirs is also on Scope 1 and 2. Now, what we've done with Scope 3 is set a further 30% reduction target on Scope 3 for 2030, and we think, although I do take those points that you've made as fact about the carbon, that those are ambitious for us in terms of what we've set and in terms of what we can manage going forward, and really I think in terms of regional and national targets, I think they make sense for us as an organisation as well.
Could I add a touch there? Ewan, you'll have something probably a bit more expert than me. But when you move beyond Scope 1 and 2 emissions, you're really talking about a quite fundamental change, either in the way that we operate or in the way that we organise our economy to help us operate. For example, would we have residential universities if we were really focused on Scope 3 in our current understanding of what we can do to get Scope 3 down? We probably wouldn't, because the travel involved would just be would push us beyond what's possible. Now, the thing for me is what can we do as a university through the insights of our academics and through the application of those insights from our students to shift the parameters of the conversation. So one of our colleagues who's at the heart of the Bio Yorkshire project I mentioned is working at the cutting edge of how you can move away from hydrocarbons-based fuel for aviation to fuel which emerges from bio feedstocks. In other words, stuff that we grow or stuff that we can repurpose from the waste from what we grow. Now, I don't think we're going to hit Scope 3 unless we absolutely shift the model by which we organise fundamental parts of our lives. So it goes way, way beyond what we do operationally as a university. And it depends absolutely fundamentally on how we can use our expertise to innovate in the way that we organise our societies and our economies. And I think if we think about it that way, we can do it. If we think about it simply as reducing our carbon emissions using our current categories of thinking, we won't do it.
Thanks, Charlie. Ewan, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, my answer is at one level probably no, it's not enough. But I think it comes around how we think about it. And I have the luxury of sitting here, but I don't have Richard's job where he's got to account for everything that we're doing. I don't have Charlie's job; he's got to keep the lights on in the university at the moment. But I think the challenge is enormous for society as a whole. There's no doubt about it. I regularly say, welcome to the end of the world as we know it, because climate change is going to change absolutely everything, because nothing will be able to stay the same under the conditions of a changing climate or the conditions of a changing and transitioning world to get to low carbon in the way that sort of Charlie's highlighted there. And there's lots of different ways of thinking about it. So somebody like me might be saying that's not enough, that's not enough, that's not enough. But you also need to be able to work with managers that can maintain things to a degree as they are, so you have a much smoother transition as to what's happening. And I think that's what's happening here in terms of the sustainability strategy. But what it's doing is it's opening up the possibilities for new kinds of thinking about how one works, just in the way the pandemic has. We've gone are the days of everybody working in the office now. It's a different kind of environment that we're working in. So we're setting up a set of possible conditions. And there's a process in strategy development that's called ratcheting up. So as you make something ambitious, and you have to have ambitious targets, and actually, when you look at an institution like ours, the targets that we got may not look massively ambitious, but they really are. They're not easy to get. We've only got 7.5 years left to get to 2030. So these are really ambitious targets. But what that allows you to do is it gets you over the disbelief of what an ambitious target might be. So next time you ratchet up to an even bigger ambition. And that's really key. But that only comes if you have a transformational intent. If you think you can stay the same, that's it. You've got to have a transformational intent. You've got to see that the world is going to bring massive change, and you have to be part of it. And that's part of the alignment that you're in. And again, that's why the voices of a much, a diversity of voices in this space, a diversity of actors in the space is absolutely crucial, because you won't retain that ambition without that diversity in there as well. So I think, there's different ways of answering that question, but it's an enormous challenge and we've got to keep our eye on it. But you've got to start from somewhere.
Okay, thanks, Jan. I think just to finish off this area, Ben, I think this one can only be directly for you, I think. So there's a question here that says, until this year, YUSU has had no formal consideration of the environment in its decision making. Even now, YUSU refuses to fully implement active policy on sustainability. What assurances can you make that senior management at YUSU fully understand the necessity of embedding sustainability into strategy and everyday activities?
I wish I could give a more comprehensive. I wish I could tell you that I'm an expert on sustainability and we've got a dedicated sustainability director and a written strategy. We don't, and I'd be lying if I said we did. What I can tell you is that there is this really compelling ambition, and that is about how we bring together students' radical ideas and aspirations and ambitions and try and glue them together with other institutions, including YUSU itself and the university and others. I don't forgive me because I fear I'm being evasive because I don't know the specific. There's clearly a specific policy that they're concerned hasn't been implemented, and I don't know what it is. So I can't really answer that one. I'm afraid. But beyond what I've just said, the ambition is there, but it will take us time because we're learning as well. And we'll I was really taken. This is a little bit off subject, but I was really, you talked about feelings, and for me, that's the transition that YUSU is going through. We're realizing that feelings matter, and now we've got to glue together the feelings with the hard metrics and the hard actions, and that's going to be a transition for us. But look, we know that the agenda is emotive, and we know that it can inspire, radical, direct action. And sometimes I think historically we've been scared of that, and we've kind of, hidden away from people challenging us and questioning us. We're now trying to say that we want to understand their anger, we want to use their anger, we want to try and turn it into, real formulas for action and change. But that is a transition for us, and we look forward to going on that journey with our students.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I'm just going to go back one subject. So one of the participants in chat feels their question on investments in conflicts and companies wasn't properly answered. I'm afraid that's probably as a result of me rather than expertly bundling it up with another question. So the specific point is, could someone please pick up the question about what the university is doing about divestment from arms and conflict companies? And I think the inference here is that, well, the original question was the university refuses to do so, and that's in violation of international law. So is there anyone that could pick that up, please?
I'll respond. I'm not sure I can pick it up because I really don't know the detail behind the question, a bit like Ben's response to the last one about what exactly the focus of the question is. So if whoever has put that writes to me, I will find an answer because I am certainly not aware that we are breaking international law through our investments policy. And if we were, I'd want to know about it. So I'd need to know more about the question before I could give an answer. So Jamie, if that's acceptable, I'm just vc@york.ac.uk. Please, whoever posed that question, send me it with a bit more detail, and I'll see what I can do to answer it.
That's great, thanks, Charlie. I don't have the names of the people asking the question, but if Joe or somebody could pick that up and make sure they've got the VC's email, that's a great offer. Thank you, Charlie.
Jamie, you're on mute.
Classic. Thank you, Joan. So I was just saying there, thank you for that offer, Charlie. I don't have the names of the questioners, but if Joe or someone could please pick that up and make sure they have the VC's email, that would be fantastic. And we're about halfway through now, so we're going to move on to a different area. Right. Okay, so I think this probably falls under the theme of quality education, and there's some questions around academic and organisational responsibility here. So again, I'm just, in the interest of speed, I'm just going to group some similar questions together. So there's a question, the first one is, will climate and environmental education be embedded into all courses? And secondly, how will staff be trained to deliver teaching that consistently embodies these principles? So I don't know, is that one for you, Charlie, to begin with? I'm not sure.
I'll have a go. There is an issue called academic freedom, which is about the fundamental choice of academics to define their own teaching agenda. So my answer is a little bit hedged by that, but I do think that we should have the opportunity for all students, whatever their academic program, to engage in sustainability education and ideally applied sustainability education. In other words, I think Johan said at the start, moving away in environmental geography, away from problem analysis to a solution focus. I would really love the university to be in that space. It's not at the moment. That's partly structural because of the way we organise our teaching into blocks which don't necessarily align with each other. We're trying to change that. I would like to see a curriculum review in the coming years enable that ambition to be achieved. On the training side, I'd also like us to think much more systematically about how we support our academics to grow into their roles once they join the university. And one of the big initiatives we're currently thinking about for our sort of strategy implementation is how to produce a more rigorous, more systematic, more evenly implemented approach to training around teaching, which would, if we were going to have environmental sustainability as part of all academic programs, necessarily encompass that. But it could also encompass some of the other issues that were thrown up by earlier questions when we were talking, for example, about decolonisation. So I'd like to say that I want the answer to those questions to be yes. And I hope we can move towards that in the nearish future.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. There's another couple of questions which I'm also going to group. So will there be a dramatic shift in research focus within all departments, presumably as a result of the sustainability plan? And if so, how will the university support staff and facilitate researchers changing their field of work?
Can I tee Johan up for that one, Jamie? Again, I cannot tell academic colleagues what to research. I wouldn't get very far that way. What I'd say is that many academics, often from quite unexpected directions, are focusing on issues to do with environmental sustainability or sustainability more broadly defined. And this is a point where I'm going to tee up Johan, perhaps also to talk about where we are headed already on the teaching side through some of the initiatives that he's involved in.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think there's a range of initiatives happening around the new Environmental Sustainability Academy for York around the teaching, and that's a range of challenge-oriented modules that are available to students across the university and things like that. So there is a shift, perhaps even more than Charlie intimated there. In terms of but there's a long way to go. And I think it's the same for teaching and research. There's an enormous challenge that we have around this. And one of the ways I describe it is that many of the questions, particularly around things like climate change, yes, we need to know more about the problems, but actually the questions are now very much about what do we do with it? How do we deal with it? How do we approach that? How do we implement change? How do we develop new creative ways of innovations and solutions? And universities, and York is no exception, are often not very well set up for that. And a good analogy in there is that it is about learning to ride a bicycle. You can't learn to ride a bicycle watching a PowerPoint presentation. You have to get on and fall off. right? You have to learn by doing and doing that. And there are lots of great examples of innovations where people are, students are getting their hands dirty in all sorts of different ways, doing lots of different forms of learning. It's not to say that that's not happening, but that's quite a fairly fundamental shift in terms of how we think about what learning is, what education is, and also how our universities are structured to do that. Lecture theatres are not very conducive, for example, for much more hands-on type stuff. So we're not alone in that space. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is an enormous shift that universities have got to go through. And it's what I would refer to as the conceptual emergencies. We've got these real emergencies of the things that we need to deal with in terms of the challenges that are out there in terms of dealing with carbon emissions and reductions. But we've got these conceptual things as well that shape our pedagogical approach and reshape and require us to do things really differently. And again, that comes and is opened up by the notion of renewing our commitment to being a university for public good. It doesn't answer the question, doesn't say that we're doing it. And as I think Charlie highlighted, we really want to be doing much more of this. And then you bring in the online stuff and the online learning that comes in there. And again, that's another massive shift that's going to be facing universities. So I see it coming. Whether it comes fast enough or in the right way, I don't know, but I see it coming because we can't not do it. I think I've only been here 2 years, but I've been very inspired by some of the leadership that we've got in the university that is really open to these different ways of thinking. And I think that's a really encouraging sign for us.
And Johan, do you think the approach that you've described, will that help reduce some of the more carbon intensive aspects of research culture, such as international travel and so on?
I don't know, because that in itself is a massive shift as well. But that's partly why we've decided to appoint a director of sustainability. We need to look at it across the board in terms of what we're doing. It's not as simple as just shifting from one thing to the other, but it's actually about how you see that whole pattern shift that is we're already in as part of an opportunity to do things differently and an opportunity to have a much greater impact in the world. So we're only at the beginnings of that, as are most organizations on the planet as well. So I think we're just another example of that, and we've got to tackle that, but we've got to open up the conversation around that as well.
Just to add to that, that kind of framing of an educational experience of the total package and not just what happens in the classroom. There's some really good examples already of work that our careers and placements team are doing through York Futures, and particularly Professional at York, working with small charitable institutions and other businesses across the region who are often grappling with a whole range of problems that intersect with this wider sustainability agenda. And so there's some really interesting work there. We're using MOOCs to think about some massive open online courses, to think about ways of highlighting issues and subjects that either aren't taught at school or are of such transcendent interest to external stakeholders to really drive engagement around some of these complex issues as well. And the other opportunity is really every organisation is grappling with environmental social governance issues and seeing massive dearth in their ability to bring in graduates and other employees with the kind of green skills, for want of a better phrase. So the opportunity through our Environmental Sustainability Academy to start developing programmes in partnership with major and small employers who are really struggling to get the kind of talent that they want. So we've got an opportunity around that programme co-curation for the future as well.
Thank you, Joan. There's a related question come up in chat, actually, which references some of the comments that Ben made earlier about community involvement, but I also feel reference some of the things that you've said and indeed have just mentioned. So the question is, how can you build the kind of community involvement that both you and Ben have spoken about into modules that students undertake, and more than teaching carbon lit, do stuff with local people that makes for better communities?
And we have a very high proportion of students who volunteer in the community, both in schools and charitable organisations and through public engagement. And I would want to see even more of that. I suppose there's a question about how we recognise that in the context of their education and accreditation that is worth considering as well. So some of this is picked up. So things like the York Award are really cited as massive opportunities for students to enhance their transferable skills. We have a mentoring platform as well, where students have the opportunity to engage with our alumni around the world in the context of advice and guidance around some of the areas that they want to get involved in. but there's always more to do. We work with a whole plethora of local organisations. I'd like to see us widen the geography of that, and in a new Zoom world, really frankly, thinking about the engagement and opportunities for students to pick up some of our partners in key priority areas that we're working in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in lots of places around the world where we can learn, and where the problems of climate change are frankly even more acute, and the intersection of that and economic migrancy and a whole plethora of other things. So I think there's a lot to go at in this space, and a lot of opportunities around thinking about what communities we want to engage with and how do we insert our students into supporting and learning in equal measure.
Thanks very much. And just very briefly, how do you think that affects universities' desire to recruit international students?
Yeah, I wondered when that question was going to come up. It's a balancing act. And I also think we should think about the fact that we are rapidly expanding our online programme provision as well through our partnership with higher education partners. But frankly, I am a passionate believer that society is always going to be better when you have a multicultural environment where you have a diversity of opinions, experiences, and attitudes, because of all the problems we face in our world, most of them are down to a lack of communication and economic power. And the only way I can see a way of transcending those challenges is through education provision, and collaborative education provision at that. So we have to figure out the mechanisms through which we are already, my international recruitment team haven't been on an airplane in 2 years, and yet we have international students who are making their way here. So we are fundamentally looking at the models of engagement, thinking about the fact we have overseas offices now who are doing some of the heavy lifting for us in some key priority markets. But do I think we can revert back to the idea of being a solo cultural community? Frankly, no. I think we are a better university if we are multicultural in every dimension, and we just have to figure out a way. And I'm looking at Richard, even though he can't see me looking. We've got to figure out a way to kind of offset that, for want of a better phrase. But we are a better community if we are multicultural in our dimensions.
Okay, Jamie, if I may, I'm going to almost risk slightly disagreeing with my colleague Joan here, because I do think we've got to be open to thinking in different categories. I do think we've had a huge jolt in our thinking and our learning because of the COVID experience. And I think that does open up different ways of establishing that international community and the richness that comes from interaction. And I don't think that necessarily means we will imagine that in the future international students will fly from all sorts of different parts of the world and spend time here. It might be that we do larger parts of our teaching online, so with delivery at distance, and it might be that rather than in a sense thousands of students flying here, it might be that a much smaller number of lecturers and tutors might fly to regional education centres elsewhere in the world. And the international interaction will come in part through online engagement, and I think we've all been surprised by how well that can work, but also that in-person engagement, which need not be in York. So I think we've got an opportunity to begin to think differently about how we deliver education to an international audience, which would also have an impact on environmental sustainability.
Thanks, Charlie. Johan?
Yeah, I think that's great, Charlie. I think that's a great example of just having that transformational intent, being aware of these things, and then thinking. So we've got a strategy, but strategy is always an evolving process. And I think these are, you have to go with the flow a little bit and then start ratcheting things up and thinking differently. It's really great, Charlie, to hear you say these sorts of things, because it just opens up the sense of possibility of how we can really deal with it, and again allows us to be creative about how we work across the dilemmas. There are lots of dilemmas. There's not one answer to them. We have to find creative solutions through them, but that comes from being open about it and willing to to really think this through and work that through and capture the diverse different ways of doing it. And I would love to see something, if we were able to get the sustainability clinic going fast, then how could we ratchet that up massively so that we've got a phenomenal space for lots of creative ideas and thinking and bringing different design skills in and things like that. And that's the sort of thing that we need. We need to unleash that possibility of lots of new ideas and then finding ways to enact them.
And it doesn't need to be a physical entity here in York, Johan, the sustainability clinic. It could be a methodology that could be applied anywhere in the world with groups of York students who happen to be anywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I think we've got, if we're finishing on time at 8, I think we've got time probably for another couple. There's a beautiful question in chat from Mel that I'm going to try and end on. But before then, there's 3 questions. So I'm going to try and group these a little bit more articulately than perhaps previously. So these are really on environmental responsibility, and I think they also pick up the University Sustainable Development Goal on good health and well-being. So let me see how to do this succinctly. I think we'll just go to the nub of it. So 3 points here. The first point is the participant feels the university has never factored existing wildlife into its expansion plans. So how would the university remediate that in the future? And I think there's a reference, an indirect reference there to the target, the health and well-being goal, the target within there that talks about actively developing campus grounds and building design as a health and well-being tool. So there's shades of building design and biophilia and so on within that. And then secondly and thirdly, there's a reference to the amount of usable space that the university has in walkways, buildings, roofs. So has the university considered either placing renewable energy resources on roofs and so on, and could we grow food on campus? So I'm sorry, I don't know if that kind of chunks too many things together, but you've basically got this issue or this question around, has the university done enough about wildlife and how can it remediate that, linked to health and well-being, and then secondly, the use of the space that the university has for renewable energy resources and growing food. So that's a bit of a multifaceted question, but maybe you can split that into 2. Shall I start with you, Richard, on the renewable energy and the walkway bit?
Yeah, sure. We're actually currently doing a decarbonisation study which picks up elements of this. So it covers the roofs that we could put things like solar PV on. It covers where we might put some large-scale ground-mounted PV and other renewable technologies. I guess what we've got to consider is what is going to be best with the investment that we can put in, and that's something that we're working through at the moment. So it's not a simple answer about use the roofs for PV, because that might not be the best option. So we've got a range of options at the moment that we're reviewing, and we're hoping to develop those into the carbon management plan. So that'll set our future direction in terms of what we might do on site in terms of renewables, what the possibilities are of off-site renewables, and using other areas of land where we could do things away from the university. So it's all within the conversation at the moment in terms of our future, in terms of energy and how we produce. But it's definitely in the conversation.
Thanks very much, Richard. Does someone want to pick up the wildlife question? I'm not sure who's best placed to do that, to be honest.
Can I have a quick go? Because again, it's one of those things I'm not quite sure where the question is coming from. And Richard told us earlier about all the various accolades that the university has for maintaining its grounds. But I'm thinking in particular about Campus East. Now, obviously, that's somewhere which has been built on and wasn't built on before, but it was arable farmland before. which is not the most diverse of habitats. And where we haven't developed campus east, especially that land to the south of the lake, that is now much more biodiverse than it ever was when it was farmland. So I think there are probably different ways of approaching that question. I think we actually have a really good record in that space. And very briefly on the built environment and well-being, one of the things that we're looking to do in the next years is to establish a Department of Architecture at the university. And when we do, it won't be like departments of architecture that have been long established in other places. We're going to come into architecture right at that point where we put environmental considerations right at the very heart, and where we think about things like well-being as expressed through our buildings right at the heart. So I hope in the coming years we'll have a really big practical example of how we'll tackle that question. But I'm sure also that we have some specialists in environment and geography who are already doing that, Johan.
I mean, there's all sorts of various bits happening at the moment in that space, and as I say, as we move forward in the into a more solutions oriented approach in our department, then that will grow as well.
Okay, thank you both very much. So just to finish up, so I'd like to come back to where I started and apologise to participants if we haven't been able to cover all questions, because there's really been too many to fit in the hour. But there's a couple in chat I want to finish on. The first was I'm going to read out. I'm afraid I'm not going to ask people to answer them because I don't think it's time. There's time to do it, but it might be important for panelists to have the information that this person is giving us. So this is from Savannah Green. We can see her name in chat. And Savannah says, coming back to the question about members of University of York staff being involved in delivering this agenda, I wonder how non-academic staff, i.e. administrators, coordinators, can be encouraged to be involved. I work in the Centre for Global Programmes and in direct contact with international students and partners, and involved in carbon literacy, the Green Impact Team and other initiatives. So that sounds like an opportunity to me, and I'll leave it to the appropriate panellists to pick that up as they see fit. The question I want to end on is from somebody called Mel, who says, hi, I've really valued seeing this webinar, and thank you for making it available. Public good is a great goal and opportunity. I am one of several zero waste businesses here in York and would like to ask each contributor what they are most personally proud of changing in their personal lives. What have they personally changed with regard to climate change, sustainability, or zero waste? Now, I suspect there isn't going to be time to ask all 5 panellists, so I'm going to quite unilaterally and arbitrarily ask Johan and Joan, please, and be brief if you would, please.
Shifting to Triodos Bank. There you go.
Buying local as much as I possibly can, rather than just wandering off to a supermarket, and just picking up on, and I've also signed up to the carbon literacy training program, which sounds quite scary. Savannah, hello, it's great to have you on the call. CGP is a proud part of external relations. I would be very happy to talk with you offline about how you can get involved in a raft of community stuff that we're planning. And final thing is we do grow food on campus. So we grow food, and we also have bees. So there you go.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Johan and Joan. Well, I suspect, unless someone tells me otherwise, that's all we've got time for. So that only just gives us a minute to say thank you to everybody and wrap up. So do Felicity and Pierrick want to come in here, or shall I just crack on and wrap things up? Just sign off, I'm being told. Right, jolly good. Okay, so I'd like to thank all the participants for registering and asking some great, really informed and challenging questions. And I'd like to thank YUSU for organising it and for the university for supporting it. I think it's a great contribution to One Planet Week. And particularly like to thank all the panellists for giving up some of their valuable time on a Monday evening, no less. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, I hope it's been useful for everybody. And enjoyable. So bye-bye for now.